Welcome to today's episode. I am excited to introduce Brandon Singh, a former engineer turned writer who is now mastering the art of content storytelling to help creators attract their first 1,000 followers. Brandon's unique background combines technical precision with creative flair and is here to share his secret for crafting compelling content that resonates. Plus, when he is not helping creators grow their audience, you can find him tracking rugged track on his mountain bike. Let's dive into Brandon's journey and uncover the strategies behind storytelling. Hi, Brandon. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I appreciate it. And the kind words.
Yeah, you're most welcome. You made a fascinating transition from engineering to writing. What inspired you to make that switch? And how did your engineering background influence your approach to content storytelling?
So how did I get started? So I've been an engineer since 2008, a while. I worked as an engineer formally for about 12 years. After that, I got interested in house flipping. So I flipped houses for, well, I guess technically I still do, but it's been about 6 years. And then kind of a couple years after that, I started getting into rental properties. But that also then led to me starting a remodeling company with a buddy. And it was kind of that remodeling company was the genesis for starting to learn about writing. Because I realized, if we could run ads successfully, then we could scale our business pretty quickly. And I did not figure that out completely, but I did learn that I was not a very good writer. And so that kind of started me on the journey of learning about writing. I guess that's the very short version of it.
As someone who is addicted to mountain biking, how does this passion intersect with your work in storytelling and content creation? Do you find any parallels between the two?
Yes and no. It's really nice to go mountain biking just to escape, if that makes sense. Just to kind of get away from everything. And it usually requires a decent amount of focus so you don't, run into trees. So it's really nice to kind of, center your mind on the thing that you're doing and kind of remove all the rest of the stuff that is distracting you. So oftentimes I don't usually go mountain biking to come up with ideas, more so just to give my mind a rest and kind of let things, percolate and kind of new ideas to come almost subconsciously, but it's mainly just to have fun.
Yeah, having fun is also important. But yeah, basically it helps you learn how to minimize distractions.
Yeah. Kind of like working out. It's similar to, I used to lift weights when I was younger, and it was very that. Yeah.
You help creators attract their first 1,000 followers. What are some key storytelling techniques you recommend for those starting out?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I look at content in a couple different ways. So one would be, this is kind of divergent from specific storytelling, but so we'll get back to that in a minute.
Yeah.
If you want to bring in more traffic to you, so we'll talk specifically on Twitter, writing things that are more, I don't know, like you could use the word platitude, but I don't know that specifically describes it, but it'd be something that is very appealing to the broad general audience. That's also an idea that is, either makes them curious or something that's very, polarizing, like they would agree or disagree to get engagement, right? So if you write with the intent of, trying to go viral, for instance, the overarching goal would be to bring in more traffic to you, right? More eyeballs, more people to see your stuff.
Yeah.
Specifically to storytelling, I would say, if you're telling personal stories about you, right? Like if you write about something that happened to you over the weekend, and if you frame it in a way, I think a very important, because it's easy to just tell a story about yourself, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's what helps people connect with you is to kind of hook them with something in the beginning, right? Like, why do they care what you did over the weekend, right? So maybe let's think about it. Maybe you used to procrastinate all the time, and this past weekend you did something, and it sparked this thing in your mind that kind of shifted, and now you're not procrastinating as much anymore. Or on this specific, topic, you stop procrastinating, right? If you start with that, right, like you hook them in with that, right? That's why they care. So if you ask the question, why does my reader care to read this? What's in it with that? Answer that question first. Start with that and then lead into your story is a good way to get people interested enough to start reading, and then your personal story is what helps bridge the connection between you and them.
Basically make it relatable to them, like
a relatable problem or specific desirable outcome or result that they want.
How do you approach crafting content that not only attracts followers but also engages and retains?
It's kind of a two-pronged approach between storytelling and teaching people how to do things, right? So the storytelling is what brings the connection, right? You're sharing examples of your life. And if you're teaching them about something they specifically care about. So for example, if I'm talking to people that want to learn how to flip houses, right? I would talk about how do I run the ARV or what the house is going to be worth once you fix it up, resell it, right? Because that's something that's important. Fundamentally flipping houses comes down to understanding, some basic principles. And one of those would be the mathematics behind whether or not you can actually make money. And it's like fundamentally it's easy to understand, but it's harder to actually do. So it would be, back to your, like, how do you keep them engaged and connected connected
Yeah,
and the audience growing. It comes back to, right, you hook them so they're interested in you specifically with the stories, but then you're talking about things that teach them stuff that they want to learn about, right? So I would be attracting people that want to flip houses if I'm talking about houses, and specific skills or, tricks or tips that would help them, So for example, here's a great tip. If you want to flip houses, everybody knows, well, most people know that kitchens and bathrooms are what make the value of the house worth more, right?
Yeah.
So make your kitchen. So here's a great example of a way to save a ton of money flipping houses, specifically in the kitchen, is oftentimes what you'll see in houses that have been fixed is, at least in the United States, is either granite or quartz countertops. It's stone. Well, granite, stone, quartz is like a man-made stone. Regardless, they look really nice, but they're also very, very, very expensive. You can spend more on your counter than you do on anything else in the kitchen. But that's what most people do when they fix houses. They put in those because they think this is what everybody wants. But here's the secret. You can do wooden countertops. We call them butcher block countertops, right? They look really nice, but they cost a fifth to a tenth of what those other countertops cost. And it's twofold. One, it still looks really nice, so it doesn't reduce the value of your house. But two, most people aren't doing it, so now your house stands out, right? So it actually helps you sell even more. So for example, the house that I'm sitting in, right, we use wooden countertops in our kitchen, and it saved me about $9,000, right? So it's $9,000 in my pocket for something, right? So just little things like that, right? Like that would be an example of how can you create content that keeps people around.
Got it. So on to the next question. What common mistake do new creators make with their storytelling, and how can they avoid them?
Yeah, I think that goes back to the other answer, and I still do it. It's hard because a lot of times you want to share your story, right? You want to tell people, like for example, this past weekend we for the first time we butchered our own chickens, and I've got kids, so we had the kids involved and they were learning. It was really cool. And I wanted to just post about that, like, just sharing that, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think the mistake that's easy to make is I just post that, but what's the point? Why does anybody read it, right? Why does anybody care? And that's the mistake, is asking that question. You've got the idea, now let's position it under the question of why do they care, right? So for me, what came to mind and what I ended up posting was, most people have no idea where their food comes, right? Especially their meat. And what's worse is in the United States, the meat production, on a commercial scale is very bad. Like the environment's really bad for the animals, especially in cattle, chickens, right? Like oftentimes the chickens are so tight they can't even really move, and it's just, so I kind of played that angle. So then it engages a larger audience, right? Why do people care that I butchered chicken? Well, they care because it's important to know where your food comes from, and they might not have realized that, right? So this is me saying, hey, this is what I taught my kids this weekend. Where does your food come from? This is how it happens. Like when we're eating chicken, this is how it started, and this is how we get it.
Yeah, basically try to give them as value as possible. Like not only think about sharing a story, but figure out how to give them the value from it.
Yeah. And I think that you said something I think a lot of people talk about but don't understand, is adding value, right? So you hear it everywhere. Oh, just add value, solve problems, add value. Everyone wants value. Well, what does that really mean? Well, what I think it means, and I want to know what you think it means. What I think it means is like what's valuable is a specific problem for a person. So for example, right, before we started this podcast, you said, hey, in a second, I'm going to hit record. Well, I'm thinking, man, that's really cool. I know that there's recorded calls, but I actually don't know how to do that. So I was actually, when we were off the call for a minute, I was actually Googling, okay, how do I record calls, right? So that specific value would have been valuable to me in this case. Hey, what's the process to record a Google Voice call? What about you? What do you think it means to add value?
Basically, with which the audience will learn something. Like you mentioned that they will learn how from where their food comes from. So basically, yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, or it can be entertainment as well, or it can be motivation like this.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because sometimes you just on to be entertained. You don't really want to learn anything.
Yeah,
That might describe most people.
basically it depends on your niche, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Can you share a success story from your work where your content strategy made a significant impact?
Yeah. So I'll take you. How much time do we have? Because I got a long answer for that, or I can give you the quick answer.
You can give the quick answer, I think.
Okay.
Quick answer
All right.
will
So,
be enough, yeah.
Yeah. So the quick answer. So I had pretty recently learned that I'm trying to think how to condense it. Okay, so not that long ago, I was trying to figure out what are my skills, my talents, my gifts, the thing that I'm the best at. And I came across the book that led to kind of me getting a deeper understanding of God. Like, so I believe the Bible, right? So God of the Bible and Jesus and the Holy Spirit and how all that works, and really just praying and listening to Him. And ultimately, what came out of that was me discovering that we all actually have the ability to hear from God. It's just a matter of whether or not we're listening. And so, but what also the really cool thing about that is you can ask Him what it is that he called you? Like, what is it that he created you with? And so for me, it was two words came to mind when I was praying and asking God. He said, encouraging and creator. And it really struck me, right? Like I went into engineering originally because I like things, I like buildings. And I can look back through my life and see all the times conversations with people and been very encouraging. And so it really connected. I was like, man, I want to help people do this because this is awesome. And so actually, you know, with quite a few people, not anybody on the internet yet, but actually we're going to be talking later this week. But, you know, like friends and family and some friends of friends kind of walked through this process and learned like a lot more about themselves. Actually, I was talking with my brother. So like back to your question, how did my content impact somebody that really changed their life? So my brother was working a job that he didn't like, and we were talking about it, and eventually we kind of went through this process. He went through it with me, and he discovered that he really wanted to build a construction company, you know, similar to the business that I had. You know, after our conversation, he was so encouraged and like clear and distinct on his plan that he literally quit his job the next day and started a remodel company. I'm like, dude, this is awesome. Like, that's so sweet. He's been doing great ever since. So, very short version of the story.
What drives you in your work as a content storyteller? What keeps you motivated and passionate about helping others grow their audience?
Oh, that's a good question. What keeps me motivated? I think it really comes back to the drive to help people, honestly. I can't tell you how many times in my life I felt like I've just been in a point where I really wish someone could just, you know, almost a supernatural, someone could just come in and say, okay, Brandon, here's the path. Here's what you're good at. This is what you should focus on. This is what you should help people with. This is what you're going to enjoy the most. This is where you'll find joy, right? Like all of that kind of culmination of just discontentment and searching for something different and feeling like I'm just stuck, you know, like there's no way out. Like that feeling and position and just stuckness is what really keeps me like motivated to help people, because I want to help people not be in that place anymore. And to be honest, as an engineer, I was there for a long time because I felt very strongly like I wanted to have a business. And looking back, I realized the reason I didn't have one is because I just didn't do it. But in my head, right, like our perception is reality, right? So in my head, I just kept thinking, okay, I want to have a business, but I don't know what to do. What can I do? What can I build? Who can I help? You know what I mean? Like all these things. It's like I knew how to make money as an engineer, but I didn't know how to make money without having a job. And that was it was like the not knowing what to do, and the fear of the unknown was enough to keep me from making the decision. Like it would have been awesome to have somebody come alongside and encourage me and say, hey, Brandon, you know, it's not that hard. Just pick something that you like and just do that, you know, and then help me. What is the thing that I like?
Basically, sometimes people get confused about how to start, and a lot of people just quit because of that. So I think what you are doing is very great.
Yes, I have almost quit very many times in the past few months. Even earlier this morning, I was talking to my wife, like, what am I doing here? He's like, you know what you're doing. I'm like, I do, but it's not that clear. What are your thoughts on role of technology in content creation and storytelling? Do you see any upcoming trends that creators should be aware of? That's a really good question. I will give you my 2 cents. I think it's easy to point to artificial intelligence as a shortcut to do the work for you. And I see it differently. And I think it's a very hot topic because a lot of people think that it's going to do the work for them. And from my observation and experience, it's more like I'll relate it to something that is very familiar to me. I'll relate it to a table saw versus a hand saw, right? AI is like the table saw. Like it's a much more powerful tool. I also believe the same. Yeah. So I think that, you know, it's important to think of it that way. And I think when you use it that way, it's very helpful and useful. Do I use it to create my content? Occasionally. It doesn't write for me, but it does. Sometimes when I'm stuck, I'll have it help me generate ideas. I also use it for idea generation. Like sometimes there is just a block in mind that I cannot come up with new ideas. So that's when I use ChatGPT. Yeah. Do you believe that content creation and storytelling can significantly impact personal and professional growth? Do you see this evolving in the future? Yes. And yes. I think if you go back through time, people really connect with and relate to each other's stories, right? Like you think of when you learn facts, I mean, that's kind of the banner that I have, right? Like you learn facts and you don't remember them, but you remember stories. You know, like last time you talked to your friend and they told you a really interesting or cool or inspiring or sad story, you can probably almost verbatim tell the story to somebody else. So I think that there's a lot of power in connecting with people, either for networking or, you know, potential clients or customers or just in general through storytelling. I don't think it's something that's ever going to go away because I think it's part of how our mind works. I think that's why I will not able to replace a content creation job. Like I think it will definitely replace programmers at some point. Like basically their job will become more high level. Like they will not have to code. But I don't think it will replace content creators because humans connect with storytelling. Like AI can also tell stories, but it cannot tell a real story. Like if you have a unique story, I have a unique story, but AI cannot. Like if we even create a AI generated character, his story will not be real. Yeah. I think you're spot on. Yes. What are your thoughts on entrepreneurial figures like Elon Musk? Do you find their approaches inspiring, and how do they influence your work? I think the biggest lesson that I've taken away from either famous or large creators or people in general is I've learned to stop and try and stop comparing myself to other people from the perspective of, you don't know what they did or what they've gone through or what,
Yeah.
intersections in life have led to the point and opportunities that they've had. And I think it's really easy for anybody who's not in that position to compare themselves and either feel, usually it's not a positive feeling. So what I've taken away from that is it's cool to hear things from them. I think oftentimes there's general advice that applies that you can learn from them. But I think as you get more and more specific to, the exact tactics that you need to implement in your life or business or whatever, I think the closer they are to where you are and their story is to your story, the more likely it is that what worked for them will work for you. But to the flip side, right? I think there was an article that I saw somebody put together. It was, I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a guy that started Twitter, and there was Elon Musk, right? And it was comparing, Elon Musk is working all the time, whatever, and this other guy, spending most of his time meditating and praying and nothing. And they both built these gigantic companies, and it's a great picture of how you can get to the same goal in so many different ways. You don't have to do it like this guy, and you don't have to do it like this guy, right? And you might be somewhere in between them. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've taken away from a lot of these people is really just, we all find our own journey and to learn yourself to them.
I also believe the same, that our only competition is us. So basically, we should just try to become better than ourselves.
Yeah, and I think it's important too to have a direction, right? Because it's easy to get better, right? Like I could get better at riding a mountain bike. But what's the purpose? Would I rather spend the time getting better at? Maybe I want to learn how to do a better wheelie or ride faster, or I think spend more time riding this.
I think you should find something that people will pay for. Like obviously, you can get better at something stupid or which you do for entertainment. But if you want to do it for your business, you should find something which you love and people can pay for it.
I think you're right.
Do you think we are living in a simulation? How does this philosophical question influence your perspective on content creation and storytelling, if at all?
Oh, that's a funny question.
Yeah.
Do I think we're living in a simulation?
Yeah.
The first thing I think of is the movie The Matrix. That's actually one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
I do and I don't. So I believe what the Bible says. I think that we're physical beings, but I think there's also spiritual. And I think that we're surrounded by a spiritual realm that we don't see, right? Angels is described in the Bible. I don't think that it's necessarily a simulation in the sense that it doesn't matter or that, like we won't die or whatever in the physical sense. But I do think there's a lot more play than what we understand. I kind of liken it to, when you're a kid, your parents guide you in certain ways and give you specific information. And oftentimes it's not that they're lying to you. They're just framing the information in a way or only giving you specific details that you need to know to get from where you are to the next step that they want to help you to. I think that's similar. For example, I'll use God, right? I think it's similar with God where he reveals to us what we need to know when we need to know it, as long as we're looking to him, but he doesn't give us the end picture until later, right? As we continue to progress and grow, I think you learn more. So I don't know if I answered your question, but those are my thoughts about it.
I don't know right now. Like I'm trying to, sometimes I think it's true that we are living in a simulation, but sometimes I think that's not true.
What would it mean for you if we were?
I don't think it will make any difference. It is just something I'm curious about.
Okay. If you thought that you were, would you try to escape?
No, because I think there is a reason that we are in this simulation. Like I read that book, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and according to it, it is basically very humorous book. But I think that if we are in this simulation, there must be some reason for it.
An interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, you were going to ask another question.
What will happen when AI has more knowledge than any human? Do you think AI will affect the way content is created and consumed?
I think it will be less popular because I liken it to when you call for help or you call a business and there's a robot that you're talking to. It drives me absolutely crazy. I cannot stand that. It feels like such a waste of time. So I don't think that.
But I think that's because of the current technology. Like I'm talking about future. Like at some point, AI will, I think, have more knowledge than an human. Do you think that will happen?
Well, you're probably, if we're being honest, AI probably does have more information and knowledge than we have now, right? Because you think about like things it's been trained on, it probably already does.
Yeah.
Maybe we're asking more a question of whether or not it can start learning how to express emotions in a way that connects with humans.
I don't think that's possible.
Yeah, I think that if it was, then it probably could drive a lot of content. You know what I mean? I think people because if you feel like you're connecting, you might not realize that it's not a real person. I think that there was a marketing agency that did an experiment that I saw where they created some supermodel person, right? But it was all completely AI generated, and but they were behind the scenes, guiding the work. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't just all AI. It was again they were leveraging, and they created an account that took off. But so I think if AI could maybe, but I don't know. I guess it comes back to the question of like, why are people consuming content in the first place, right? Like, what would it be doing that people will like? Maybe it's entertainment. I don't know.
Yeah, I think in entertainment type of stuff it is possible. But for example, we are doing this podcast. I don't think people will watch AI hosted podcasts because AI can't feel emotions. Like even if we tell it to pretend that it has emotions, it will act like it. But in reality, it won't feel the emotions. Same is
Yeah.
for the movies. Like in movies also, when we see a character, we start following the actor behind the character. We don't start following the character.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. What is your current monthly recurring revenue? How do you approach setting and achieving financial goals in your business?
That's a good question. Because I've recently started online, I am not meeting my financial goals right now. What is my plan to get there? Honestly, I have no idea. But
Yeah.
the idea is forming. It's kind of a loaded question or maybe a loaded answer. Let me get back to you on that one.
For creators looking to start their journey, what's one piece of advice you'd give to help them get their first 1,000 followers?
I would ask them to figure out what the goal is. Like, what's the point of getting 1,000 followers? What are you trying to achieve? If it's followers for the sake of followers, you can just do that, through commenting. Actually got a free course that could teach people how to do that. If you're trying to get to your first 1,000 followers because you want to have leads by the time you get there, then I think you would approach it differently, right? I think that fundamentally the most important question is understanding why and what the outcome is that you're hoping for. And then I would push more for that outcome than I would the quantity of followers, because there's a lot of that have a lot of followers that don't achieve the goals that they're looking for just because they have more followers.
Yeah, I think that's very important. So that was it. How can listeners connect with you or learn more about your work in storytelling and content creation? I think your X account.
Yep. You can connect with me through my X account. I think it's at Mr. Brandon Spring.
Do you have a website?
I have one. It's called www.thebrandonspring.com. But the only thing right now that's on it is just a link to the course.
Okay, so I will just add your X account and this website in the description. So yeah, it was very nice having you, and I enjoyed talking with you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.